I'm a psychiatric nurse, and early in my career, I worked at a residential mental health facility. One of our residents was an elective mute, which means that he couldn't talk, but there were no medical reasons as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life and in fact seemed quite normal back then, with the exception of being close to 7 feet tall. He'd been raised in the deep south and joined the military when he was 19. But one night he vanished. He was declared a wall, and eventually he was declared missing and dead. 10 years later, a 7-foot-tall man walked into a VA hospital emergency room in my part of the Midwest and said to the receptionist, "My name is Marion Ducky, not the real name, and I've been dead for 10 years. Those were the last words he ever spoke. He was covered with dust, and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reported to be wearing the night he vanished. His social security number had not been used and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess via fingerprints. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man and that whomever was claiming to be him simply could not be. They demanded not to be contacted again." Marion paced all day, every day, moving his mouth that looked like talking or muttering, but no sound came out. He had an unnerving habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open, as if he were laughing heartily, but not even a breath could be heard. If I talked to him, he appeared to listen, periodically throwing his head back in that laughter-mimicking way of his. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either positively or negatively. Occupational therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin, and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again. On my last day at that job, the last thing I saw was Marion, pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to laugh. Later, I wondered if all along I'd been dealing with a ghost. All these years later, I still don't know.
When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. The distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside of town, I see someone on the side of the road flagging me down. It turned out that it was one of the guys I had attended school with. Jim, not his name, gets in the car, and we start talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, but he still looked the same. Maybe a little older. We get to town, and I ask him if he wants to come to the VFW and have a drink. He says, "No, just take me home." Jim's parents had lived only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I turned in that direction, but he said to take him to the outskirts of town. There was a mobile home park out there, and I figured that is where he lived. When we reached the end of the turn-off, he said, "Just drop me here. It was good to see you again," and he walks off into the night. I go to the VFW. Some of my old classmates. We start to talk. As we are talking about who is coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I had just picked Jim up 3 miles east of town and had dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic. My cousin goes white as a new t-shirt. Barb. Jim died on that curve 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral, I was told. I started to feel really dizzy, and I went out to the car to take some deep breaths. There on the seat is the local newspaper, printed 8 years previous, containing Jim's obituary. I still have the paper. This isn't exactly a horrifying story, so don't get too disappointed if you're not terrified. For background, I'm a 15-year-old Irish fella called Ross. I go to school in Ireland. I am now in 3rd year. At the start of 2nd year, a new fella joined the school. I was in charge of showing him around, and we've been good friends ever since. He is Portuguese and his name is Tiago. I'll call him Tig for this story. His school bag is a fairly small, bright red bag. He is a bit shorter than me. His hair is quite short and brown in color. This will become important momentarily. One day, I was upstairs in my school. It was break time, and I was going to my group's usual spot. I turned a corner and saw Tig walking along the hallway. This was weird because, at the distance I was from him, I would have seen him come up the stairs. I didn't think much of it at the time. I sped up to catch up to him. There was another corner coming up. He rounded it, and I followed suit. Except, he wasn't there. There was a staircase going back down in 2 bathrooms. One for lad and one for lassies, but no Tig. Considering how close I was behind him, he would have had to sprint towards and then jump down the stairs, or jog into the bathroom. If he went for the stairs, I would have heard. He must be in the bathroom, I thought. I sat at the bench and waited. Tig was the first other person in our group to arrive. He rounded the corner and left his bag down. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't in the bathroom. I asked him if he had already been up there, to which he answered that he hadn't. He had no reason to lie. Now, I know what you're all thinking. It was someone else. First of all, the person I saw looked the exact same as my friend from the back. Second of all, no one else in the school has that bag, to my knowledge. I haven't seen anyone else with it, that is. Third, the only place the person could have gone, without sprinting down the stairs, which I would probably catch a glimpse of anyway, would be the bathroom. No one came out of the bathroom that I didn't see enter it. Finally, my friend is a fairly distinct character. Not many people have the same body build as him. Like I said at the start, it's not exactly terrifying, but I do believe it to be due to a glitch in the Matrix.
It's definitely not the scariest thing I've been through, but for sure one of the creepiest. I'm a 19-year female, but when this happened I was 17, so this happened around the beginning of April of 2018. I was out with my family and my still current boyfriend shopping for prom shit. I wasn't really big into the whole prom thing, but was going for, I guess, the experience. The most boring night of my life, by the way. But anyways, back to the story. After the whole shopping thing was finally over, we decided to go get food from somewhere. My older brother mentioned a plus buffet Mongolian grill. We all decided that sounded pretty good and headed over there. As we're eating, laughing, and talking, you know what people do, I noticed an older man, maybe late 60s to early 70s, looking at me, smiling. I turned around thinking maybe he was looking at someone else, but no one was behind me, so that meant he was looking straight at me. I got a little weirded out, but brushed it off and continued eating. A minute or two later, I look at him again. Now not only is he still looking at me, smiling, but he's also making kissy faces at me. I got a little nervous and uncomfortable, so I quietly mentioned it to my family and boyfriend. They all told me to ignore him, and that we're leaving soon. I calmed down a little bit, but I couldn't help but look back at the man. I wish I didn't, because when I did my stomach dropped, and I was now on the verge of crying. He's now wiggling his tongue in between his middle and index finger. I'm sure everyone knows what that means. I couldn't take it anymore. I started crying and ran out of the restaurant. I know, call me a pussy, but I've been raped and sexually assaulted before, and obviously going through that shit was a very traumatic experience for me. As for anyone who's been through it, but I was extremely uncomfortable, and I couldn't be in there a second longer. He was too busy staring at my boyfriend with rage plastered on his face. I haven't gone back to that restaurant or seen that man since, and I would like to keep it that way.